I've stood at the back of that auction yard for 31 years, and I've learned to read a man by the way he raises his hand. Some raise it fast like they're swatting a fly, pretending they don't care. Some raise it slow, hopping nobody notices until it's too late. But the day Elias Rourke bought the meanest horse in 3 counties, he didn't raise his hand at all. He just stood up. Whole crowd went quiet. Then somebody laughed. Then everybody laughed. I laughed too. God forgive me, I laughed the hardest. Because that horse, lot 44, a chewed-up gray mare with one dead eye and a temper like a down power line, had already put 2 men in the dirt that morning. Nobody wanted her. The kill buyers didn't even want her, too skinny to be worth the meat. And here was this quiet old farmer, boots cracked, wife 6 months in the ground, spending money he plainly didn't have on the one animal every sane person in that barn had already given up on. We thought he was a fool. What none of us knew, what none of us could have known, was that the mean horse wasn't broken. She was looking for something. And 3 weeks later, at 2 in the morning, she was going to break down a gate and lead that grieving old man across 11 miles of frozen ground to a place the rest of us had chosen to forget. I wrote it all down. I write everything down, it's a sickness. But some numbers you don't forget even without the book. Stay with me. This one changed the way I count things. The gavel came down at $95, and the whole barn exhaled like it had been holding its breath through something indecent. Sold, Merle called from the block, and even Merle, who once sold a 3-legged mule to a man he swore could count to 4, sounded embarrassed. Sold to number. What are you, 41? 41. God help you, mister. I had my tally book open on my knee, and I wrote 44 right arrow 41, $95, insane before I even looked up. That's the sickness I mentioned. My father kept a tally book and his father before him, and somewhere down the line the writing became more real to me than the living. If a thing doesn't get written, I half believe it didn't happen. My wife used to say I'd write down my own funeral if they gave me a pew and a pencil. She's not wrong. She's usually not wrong. Number 41 was Elias Rourke, though I didn't know his name yet. I knew the shape of him, every regular did. The kind of man who came to auctions to buy 1 fence post's worth of something and stand near the coffee like the warmth was free. 40 years of sun had folded his face into a map of a country nobody visits. He wore a canvas coat the color of old dishwater, and he had a way of holding his hat against his chest that made you think of church. The mare in the ring was named on the sheet as Gry Mare, aged Vice. Vice. In auction shorthand, that one word can mean anything from cribbing to killing. In her case, it meant all of it. She was maybe 15 hands, and every one of them was misery. Her left eye was a clouded marble, blind and weeping. Her ribs stood out like the rungs of a ladder somebody had leaned against her hide. There was a brand on her hip, a lazy S over a bar, a ranch I half remembered and couldn't place, and a lattice of old scars across her chest and forelegs like she'd been dragged through wire more than once and lived out of pure spite. She'd already earned her keep in violence that morning. When the yard hands tried to load her off the trailer, she'd struck out and caught a boy named Pinto Reyes across the shoulder, spun him into the rails so hard his teeth clacked. When they finally shooted her into the ring, she stood dead center and dared the world to come closer. Ears flat, nostrils working, that one good eye rolling white at the edges, tracking every man in the room like she was memorizing us for later. "There's your athlete," somebody hollered, and the barn laughed. "Ride her to church, preacher won't need to talk about hell," said another, and the barn laughed harder. And then Elias Rourke stood up. Not to leave, to bid. I have run that moment through my head so many times the film's gone soft. What I remember is the silence right before the laughter, that half-second where 100 people all realized the joke was going to be a man and not the horse. Then it broke over him like water over a rock. Men slapped their knees. A woman 2 rows up wiped her eyes. Merle, God bless him, tried 3 times to talk the price down so it wouldn't look like theft, and Elias just kept his hat against his chest and nodded until the gavel fell. $95. For an animal you couldn't ride, couldn't breed, couldn't sell, and probably couldn't feed without losing a finger. I wrote it down. Then, because I am the kind of man I am, I got up and followed him out to the loading pens. Curiosity, mostly. And something meaner underneath the curiosity that I'm not proud of, the desire to watch a fool find out he's a fool. We all have that hunger. Most of us just don't feed it in public. He was standing at the pen rail when I got there, looking at her. Not talking to her, not reaching for her. Just looking, the way you look at a photograph of somebody you used to know. "You're going to need a stouter trailer than that half-ton," I said, nodding at his rusted-out rig. "And a plan. She's going to come off the ramp fighting." He didn't turn around. "She's not fighting," he said. "She's asking." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Asking what?" He was quiet a while. The mare had her bad eye turned toward us and her good eye turned away, which is the opposite of how a horse looks at a threat. I noticed that and didn't understand it yet. "My wife could read them," he finally said. "Horses, I never could, but I watched her do it for 31 years, and one thing she used to say—" He stopped, swallowed, started again. "She used to say the mean ones aren't asking to be left alone. That's the mistake everybody makes. The mean ones are the ones still asking. It's the quiet ones you've lost." I didn't have anything to write that would fit that, so I didn't write anything. That, for me, is a kind of respect. We got her loaded eventually. It took Elia's me, Pinto Ray's with his bruised shoulder, and a bucket of sweet feed she wanted so badly she screamed, a high, cracked, furious sound I still hear sometimes in the dead part of the night. She went up the ramp sideways, kicking the walls hard enough to bow the metal, and when the door finally latched she stood in there breathing like a bellows, and Elias put his flat palm against the outside of the trailer, right where her shoulder would be, and just held it there. "Elia's work," he said, sticking out his other hand. I didn't catch. "Cal," I said. "Cal Denning. You write things down, Cal." He'd noticed the book. Most people don't. "Since I was 9. He almost smiled. It was the first time. "Then maybe write this down. I'm not as big a fool as that barn thinks." I did write it down. I want the record to show I wrote it down before I believed it. His place was 11 miles north, up past where the county quits maintaining the road and just lets it become a suggestion. 40 acres of hardpan and one leaning barn and a house that had been white once, the way most things were something once. I followed him up in my own truck because, I'll be honest, I didn't think he'd get her unloaded alive, and I wanted to be there when the story became a story. That's the ugliest thing about me, and it's true, so it goes in the book. Getting her out was worse than getting her in. She came off that ramp like the trailer was on fire, hit the end of the lead rope, and Elias, 60-some years old, maybe 160 pounds soaking wet, did not let go. She dragged him across the frozen yard on his knees. His hat came off. His palms opened up on the rope, and he did not let go. He talked to her the whole time in a low, steady, ruined voice, not words even, just sound, the way you'd talk to something drowning. When she finally stopped, not because she was tamed but because she was tired, they were both shaking and both bleeding and standing about 4 feet apart in the middle of a field going purple with dusk. And she looked at him, good eye and all. First time she'd looked at anybody straight on all day without trying to kill them. I wrote she stopped. He didn't make her, she stopped. He put her in the round pen with a water trough and a flake of hay, and she stood in the far corner with her rump to the world, and he stood at the rail with his torn-up hands hanging at his sides, and I stood back by the trucks feeling like I'd wandered into a church midway through a sacrament I hadn't been baptized for. "You want coffee, Cal?" he asked. "It's the least I owe you." I should have gone home. I had a wife who I had a wife who was gone too, if I'm telling it true, which is the reason I follow strangers home from auctions instead of going to mine. Marian's been gone 4 years. The house is very quiet. The tally book is very loud. So I said yes to the coffee, and I want you to know that's why I was there for what came after. Not fate. Just 2 lonely men and a pot of coffee, which is how most of the important things in my life have actually happened. We sat at his kitchen table. There was a woman's coat still on the hook by the door and neither of us mentioned it. There was a canning jar of wildflowers on the windowsill, long dead, the water gone to green, and he saw me see it and said, "Ruth picked those. In June." I can't and didn't finish, and I understood because there's a coffee mug at my house with lipstick on it that I have not washed in 4 years and will not wash until the day they carry me out. Grief isn't a thing you get over. It's a thing you build a house around. That brand, I said to have something to say. Lazy S bar, I know it and I can't place it. He turned his mug in his hands. Carlson, he said, old Wendell Carlson's outfit, out past the Dutchman's on the river bottom. And then I did place it, and my stomach did something cold, because everybody in the county knew what had happened to the Carlson place. Wendell had died the winter before Hart in the barn, found 3 days later by the propane man. No kids that came home for it. The bank took the land in the spring, and a company out of Denver bought the paper, and there'd been talk, ugly talk, about animals left behind, about a herd that got sorted by men who didn't much care about the sorting. The good stock got hauled to sales like this one. The rest, people said, got left. I looked out the kitchen window at the round pen, at the gray shape of the mare standing rigid in the dark with her ruined eye toward the far ridge. She's a Carlson horse, I said slowly. She is. Then she came through the sale barn from wherever they've had her since the fall. His jaw worked. Somebody's been running these old range horses through the small auctions all winter, a few at a time, skinny, marked up, scared. This is the third one I've seen come through Merle's ring. First two I couldn't. His hands opened again, the torn palms. I couldn't. Ruth was still sick. I had to choose her over. I chose her. That's not a thing a man needs to apologize for, I said. I'm not apologizing. He looked at me, and there was something under the grief now, something with teeth. I'm telling you why I stood up today. I told myself if I saw one more, I wouldn't sit still for it again. And then there she was. He nodded toward the window. Meanest one yet. Worst off. Nobody in that whole barn would have given her a good day to die in. He wrapped both hands around the mug like he was trying to warm something that couldn't be warmed. Ruth would have known her name inside of an hour. I'm going to have to guess. I did not say what I was thinking, which was, you spent $95 you don't have on an animal that's going to hurt you, out of grief and guilt, and a promise you made to a dead woman. I did not say it because I looked at that dead jar of June flowers, and I understood that I would have done the exact same thing, and that the difference between Elias Rourke and me was only that he'd had the nerve to stand up. I finished my coffee. I drove home the 11 miles in the dark. I did not sleep well. I came back the next morning. I told myself it was to return a lead rope of his that had ended up in my truck bed. That was even partly true. 3 days I came back, then a week, then I stopped pretending there was a rope involved. The mare got worse before she got anything else. She wouldn't take feed from his hand, struck at it, at him, opened a gash over his eyebrow on the 4th day that should have had stitches, and got a butterfly bandage and a lot of cursing instead. She wouldn't be caught. She wouldn't be gentled. She paced the round pen at night in a groove she wore into the frozen dirt, always to the same corner, always with her face turned northwest toward that far ridge. And she'd stand there and scream, that cracked, furious, grieving sound, until the whole valley must have heard her and rolled over and gone back to sleep. She's not settling, I said, watching her wear her track. Elias, some of them don't. She's not trying to settle. He'd stopped flinching when she struck at him. He'd learned her range and stood just outside it and let her spend her fury on the air. Look where she stands, Cal, every night. Same corner, same direction. I looked. I'm ashamed to say I'd been writing down the number of times she screamed without ever once writing down the direction she screamed toward. That's the sickness. You can count a thing to death and never once look at what it means. Northwest, I said. Carlson's place is northwest, he said. 11 miles, maybe 12. Over the ridge and down the river bottom. He wiped his ruined hands on his coat. She's not packing, Cal. She's pointing. At an empty ranch. At something. And there was that underthing in his voice again, the thing with teeth. You don't grieve a place, you grieve who's in it. I wrote it down. I underlined it. I didn't understand it yet, but some part of me, the part that keeps the tally, the part that half believes a thing isn't real until it's written, that part underlined it twice. That was a Tuesday. I've still got the page. Wednesday it snowed, hard, the first real weather of the winter, and I didn't drive up because the road past the county line becomes a rumor when it's wet. Thursday it kept snowing. By Thursday night there was a foot down, and the temperature was falling out the bottom of the thermometer, the kind of cold that kills things that can't get out of it. And I sat in my quiet house with Marian's unwashed mug on the shelf, and I thought about a skinny gray mare screaming northwest into a blizzard at an empty ranch, and I thought about a foolish grieving man alone up there with her, and I did not sleep at all. At 2:14 in the morning, I know because I wrote it down. I wrote it down before I even understood I'd need to. My phone rang. It was Elias. His voice was strange, high and fast and young somehow, like the years had fallen off him. "She's out, Cal," he said. "She broke the gate, kicked it clean off the hinges, and she's out." "Then she's gone, Elias, in this weather you can't." No, he was breathing hard. There was wind on his end, huge and hollow. He was already outside. He was already following her. "No, you don't understand. She's not running off. She stopped at the top of the drive and she waited for me. She's waiting for me, Cal." His voice cracked straight down the middle. "She wants me to follow her. She's going northwest." And then the line went dead, and I was pulling my boots on over bare feet in the freezing dark. And I did not have the first idea that the meanest horse in 3 counties was about to lead a broken man across a blizzard to the worst and best thing either of us would ever have to write down. The county road had disappeared under the snow, and I drove the 11 miles by memory and by the 2 fresh sets of tracks running up the middle of it, one wide and staggering, a man on foot, and one narrow and sure, a horse who knew exactly where she was going. I want to be honest about what I felt, because this isn't a story where I get to be the hero, and I won't pretend it is. What I felt mostly was fear. Not of the cold, though the cold was murder. I was afraid I was driving toward a dead man. I was afraid I'd top the ridge and find Elias Rourke face down in the drifts where his heart or the weather had finally quit on him, chasing a mad horse into nothing, and that I'd have to be the one to write down the number of the morning, and the name of the fool and my own name right under it as the last man who'd let him go. I found him at the top of the ridge, and he wasn't dead. He was on his knees. Not from collapse. He'd gone down on purpose in the snow at the lip of the river bottom, looking down into the dark bowl of the old Carlson place. And the mare was down there, a pale ghost against the black barn, and she was screaming, and this time the scream was answered. I got out of the truck. The cold took the breath right out of me, and over the wind, thin and high and terrible, I heard the sound that came back up out of that valley to meet her. It was small. That's the thing I couldn't make sense of at first. It was such a small sound. "Cal," Elias said without turning. His voice had gone very quiet and very steady, the church quiet, the sacrament quiet. "Cal, there's Bobby's down there." We went down together, half sliding, him on his ruined knees and me on my backside more than once, down into the frozen bowl of a place the whole county had agreed to forget. The Carlson barn was caved in on the north side under the snow load. The house was a black shell with the windows out, and in the lee of the collapsed barn, in a 3-sided loafing shed with a foot of old filthy straw and the wind screaming through the open side, were the Colts. There were 4 of them. I have counted a great many things in my life. I have never wanted to uncount anything the way I wanted to uncount those 4. They were foals, late foals, spring foals that should have been weaned and hardy by now and instead were skeletal, hip-shot, their coats grown long and starring over bones that showed everything. They'd been left, just left. When the men came in the fall to sort Wendell Carlson's herd, they'd hauled off the mares and the good stock and the ones worth the diesel to move, And these four, these too young, too small, worth-nothing bobbies, they'd shut in a shed and walked away from. Maybe they figured somebody would come. Maybe they didn't figure at all. Maybe cruelty doesn't do that much arithmetic. 3 of the 4 were on their feet. Barely. They pressed into the back corner of the shed away from us, too weak to bolt, their eyes huge and dull. The 4th was down in the straw and not moving much, and I knew before I got to it, knelt in that filth in my nightclothes with the wind trying to peel the skin off my face. I knew that one was almost gone. And the mare. The mean gray mare who'd put 2 men in the dirt at Merle's auction, who dragged Elias across a frozen field on his knees, who'd screamed northwest every night into the dark. She pushed past both of us into that shed, and she went to the 3 that were standing, and she smelled them, one and one and one, her ruined face going over each of them, and the sound she made then was nothing like the scream. It was low. It came up out of the deepest part of her, a nickering, rumbling, broken open sound, and the 3 standing colts turned toward it like plants turning to a light they'd forgotten existed. "They're hers," Elias said. He was crying, he wasn't hiding it, and I loved him for it. "Cal, they're hers, that's why every night she wasn't grieving a place." His voice broke apart completely. "They took her bobbies off her in the fall and hauled her through the sales, and she's been trying to get back to them the whole time. Meanest horse in 3 counties. He laughed, a wet, wrecked, holy sound. "She wasn't mean. She was a mother somebody stole from." I couldn't speak. I got down in the straw next to the one that was down. It was a filly. Tiny, the runt, the late one, the one that would have been last at the milk even when there'd been milk. Her breathing was a rattle. Her gums, when I lifted her lip, were the gray of the mare's dead eye. She was cold all the way through in a way that living things aren't supposed to be while they're still living. "This one won't make it to the truck," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. And here is the morally heavy thing. The thing I'll answer for one way or another, so it goes in the book plain. We could save 3. Maybe. If we moved fast, if we got them warm, if the weather broke, if 100 things, we could maybe save the 3 that were standing. But loading 4 meant time. Warming 4 meant splitting what heat and hands we had. And the one in the straw, the runt, the almost gone one, every minute we spent trying to bring her back was a minute the other 3 stood freezing in a killing wind. The sensible thing, the thing my tally book arithmetic soul knew was correct, was to leave the runt. To make the cold count. 3 out of 4 is a number you can live with. 3 out of 4 is a mercy, even. Everybody would have said so. I'd have written it down and nobody in the county would have said a word against it. Elias knelt down in the straw across from me, over that dying filly, and I watched him do the arithmetic too, and I watched him refuse it. "Get the 3 up to the truck," he said. "You and the mare. She'll drive them now, look at her, she'll herd them right up the drive to you. Get them in the cab, get the heater going, wrap them in whatever's back there." "Elias, I've got this one." "Elias, that one's gone. You'll lose the 3 saving the one you can't." "I know the numbers, Cal." He was already pulling off his dishwater coat, the one he'd worn to the auction, the one he'd worn to bury Ruth in probably, and he was wrapping the dying filly in it, and he was lying down in the frozen filthy straw and pulling that small cold body against his chest to give it the last heat in an old man's body. I've spent my whole life doing what the numbers said. I did the numbers when Ruth got sick. I did them right up until they told me to stop spending money on a woman who wasn't going to. His voice came back. "I'm done with the numbers. You take the 3. I've got the one nobody's coming back for. That's the whole point. That's the entire point, Cal. Somebody's got to be the one who comes back for the one nobody's coming back for." I have written down a great many words in my life, and I have never had less to say. I did what he told me. God forgive me and God bless me both. I left him lying in the straw with a dying filly wrapped in his dead wife's grief, and I went and got the 3 that could be saved. He was right about the mare. She drove them for me. That ruined, vicious $95 horse put herself behind her 3 staggering bobbies and walked them up that drive through the drifts to my truck, patient as scripture. and when one would stumble she'd catch it up with that low, rumbling mother sound. And I opened the doors and we got them into the cab. 3 near-dead foals and a grown man's arms shaking too hard to work the heater knob on the first 3 tries. Then I went back down for Elias. I want to tell you the filly lived. I want to write that down more than I've wanted to write anything. Here is what I can write down because it's true, and I only write down what's true. When I got back to the shed, Elias Rourke was still lying in the straw with the small body wrapped in his coat against his chest, and the mare had come back down the drive and was standing over both of them with her ruined face lowered, breathing her warm breath down onto the 2 of them, the old man and the littlest one, and Elias was talking, that low ruined church quiet sound, no words in it, just the sound you make to something drowning. And I stood in the open side of that shed in the killing wind, and I could not for the life of me tell, in the dark, from where I stood. I could not tell which of them he was still keeping alive. I didn't go closer right away. I let him have it, whatever it was. Some numbers you don't get to take, some you just have to stand at the edge of and let a man finish counting on his own. The snow was letting up, grayest, thinnest light coming over the ridge, and down in the forgotten bottom of the Carlson place, a mean horse breathed over the 2 things she'd found in this world worth being gentle for, and I stood there with my tally book in my coat pocket, and for the first time in 31 years, I did not reach for it. Some things you carry without writing down. He named the mare Ruth. Of course he did. And the 3 that stood he named for the months, but that's spring story and a longer one, and there's a part I haven't decided yet whether I'm allowed to tell. Because there's a 4th name he only ever said once, out loud at first light, kneeling in that straw. And I still haven't written it down.